Alright, so for this project, I chose Rom Harre as my spotlight. Some background information. Harre was born in 1927 in New Zealand, where he attended the University of New Zealand for a BS in mathematics in 1948 and a master's degree in philosophy in 1952. He went on to Oxford to attend University College for a BS in philosophy in 1956. As you might notice, his background is quite diverse. His academic writing has been equally multidisciplinary. He has written about the philosophy of mathematics, the philosophy of science, ontology, psychology, social psychology, sociology, and philosophy. Regarding his book publications, Harre published his first book in 1960, The Introduction to the Logic of the Sciences, and his most recent book was published in 2012, Psychology for the Third Millennium. He has published 42 books during this time period. I have here just a selection of important books Harre has published, which includes The Principles of Scientific Thinking, Positioning Theory, Questioning Causality, The Emotions, Cognitive Science, The Discursive Mind, Discursive Psychology and Practice, and The Singular Self. Regarding his article publications, Harre has been a very prolific author, publishing 192 articles in total. His first publication came out in 1957, entitled Logic and Infralogic, and impressively, his most recent publication came out in 2018, entitled Procedures, Products, and Pictures. Finally, Harre's most cited piece from 1985 was The Philosophies of Science, which has over 1,000 citations. In talking about sociology, in an interview with Harre from 2016, he articulates about sociology. Because we create these social objects, we have to ask ourselves, what's the instrument with which we create them? In the last 50 or 60 years, language has come to be seen as the key element in all of this. This represents well the reasoning as to why Harre has focused so much of his academic attention on examining language and human interaction. He adds, much of sociological research is making explicit what we know implicitly. When he was asked about the value of social science research, Harre explained, I think it does give you a grasp of the world as it is at this moment. He continues this quote with one that many of us are familiar with. Those who know no history are doomed to repeat it. Throughout his interview from 2016, Harre emphasizes the complexity of conducting sociological research. He explains that it is conducted with different tools, in different places, in different times, mostly because the social groups that are being studied are diverse and varied. Social science data and findings are constantly changing based on the population being studied and when they are being studied, because people are constantly changing. This science works to reflect that complexity. Harre is arguably most known for his positioning theory work, which began in 1990 in a publication with Davies. They write, in speaking and acting from a position, people are bringing to the particular situation their history as a subjective being. That is the history of one who has been in multiple positions and engaged in different forms of discourse. This idea of positioning is also closely related with intersectionality, or intersectional identity theory, in my opinion, which is the idea that each of us contains multiple selves. We are people of varied interests, with varied relationships and roles, which influence how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive others, how we perceive the world, and how others perceive us. As Davies and Harre discuss, one positioning the self, one also is positioning others. To continue this idea of identity, Harre also considers the ways that the self is ongoingly produced, suggesting that humans are in a constant state of being made. This is present tense, implying that our making is never complete. Harre also describes the self not as a singular entity, but as the cumulative fragments of a lived autobiography. I think this is an especially powerful point. Harre emphasizes this idea that we are all multiple selves combined into a singular entity. And these multiple selves denote how we position ourselves and how others position us. And I think most importantly, how these positionings are fluid and in a constant state of dynamicism. This connects with Davies and Harre's notion of multiplicities of self. These include the learning of categories, which are inherently exclusionary. This is the idea that when creating groups of people based on similarities, there will always be people who are excluded. They explain that within these categories, people participate in discursive practices. Members develop a sense of self that is connected with these categories, which connects with how they position themselves. These member groups also develop a sense of belonging. And finally, there's a self-embodiment, which is seeing the self as a historically continuous and unitary being. Harre explains in his 2016 interview about researchers and the value of writing narrative. He says that the great sociologists can tell stories. In fact, it's another aspect of contemporary sociology, the idea of narratology, looking at the way in which people can build their lives around storylines. I thought this quote was especially relevant to our current course, which focuses not only on what quality narratives are, but how to engage in narrative analysis and how to represent a research study as a story. Researchers and their subjects. In discussing in a 2016 interview how to tell good sociological study from a bad one, Harre explains, one way is bringing the findings back to the people you are investigating and asking them, does this illuminate your life? This quote is especially powerful because it demands a researcher engage their attention on what really matters, not the publication, not the conference presentation, and not even just the data or the findings, but how relevant their study is to the participants, if it benefits them, if it illuminates their lives. This question is essentially a way of asking, what is the point of this research? What does it contribute? Also, by extension, Harre notes that good sociology shows the readers something about their own lives. They can connect to it. This extends the value. I will conclude this presentation with a powerful quote from Harre regarding the differences between the hard sciences and the social sciences. He explains, in the physical sciences, I'm notorious as a philosophical realist. I think we're studying reality, but we're taking shots from different points of view. That's not true in the social sciences because there isn't a world out there. There are any number of different practices that people are engaged in. It's not that there's a series of snapshots. The snapshots are the object of the enterprise. As I said at the beginning, the social world is a world we create, and in studying, we are continuing to recreate it.